Hey homies, my name is Ebony and I'm the founder of Homegirl Astrology. Homegirl Astrology is a consulting firm that supports Black women in returning to themselves to unlock their full potential and create a path towards purpose and joy. Welcome to the channel. In this video, we're talking about the 12th house in astrology. Whew, child, it's a doozy, but we're going to get through it. The 12th house is known as the darkest house in the chart. It may get a little messy today, but we're going to make it. Stick around until after the beat drops to learn more about this house. July is National Minority Mental Health Awareness Month here in the United States. So I'm just going to read this here from the U.S. Department of Health and Human Services. It's observed each month to bring awareness to the unique struggles that racial and ethnic minority communities face regarding mental health in the United States. Mental health includes our emotional, psychological, and social well-being. This is going to be a longer video, so I'll be including timestamps below for your convenience. Before we dive in though, since we are talking about mental health, I do need to leave a disclaimer. I am not a medical doctor. I'm not a licensed mental health professional. I'm not legally able to diagnose or treat anyone for anything. So I'm just sharing my own experiences, my own observations that I've seen through studies of people's charts, what I've learned through my own studies of astrology. I'm not advising you to do anything other than seek out a licensed health professional where you need support. We'll just say that this video is for entertainment purposes only. Okay, back to the astrology. So today we're talking about the 12th house, which is a house that is often associated with mental illness. So that's why we're talking about it in this specific month. As a reminder, houses in the astrology chart represent areas or categories of life. So I'll add a visual here of the 12th house so you can see where it falls in the chart. So what is the 12th house? Okay, I'm going to have to give you some positive and negative stuff because a lot of times the language around the 12th house can lead pretty rough, pretty harsh. So traditionally, it is known as mala fortuna, which is bad fortune, the house of bad fortune, or the house of enemies. It's also known as kataphora, so the casting down. It's also known as a dark house, which, may be a little racist, but it's fine. We're not going to get into it. And it's said to be the most unfortunate house in the entire chart. So it's a big bad deal, based on the traditional significations of it. Saturn has its joy in the 12th house, and we know Saturn is not really acting in a friendly way for us most of the time. We know Saturn is the author of melancholy, the author of mischief. So if it's having a good time in this house, then this house probably has some sort of analogy to mischief and to melancholy. So just keep that in the back of your mind as we go through the 12th house significations. So the 12th house represents things that are hidden, things that are concealed, restrained, secrets. It's also things that are not capable of action or things that are not yet fully understood. So it can mean things that haven't fully developed yet or haven't been recognized by the conscious mind. Traditionally, it's associated with sadness, sad events, sorrow, grief, anguish of the mind, tribulation, captivity, imprisonment, persecution, hard labor, affliction, self-undoing. So it's a whole lot of bad up in there, okay? It also corresponds to places that the public cannot access. So things that require isolation or seclusion, so like institutions or prisons. Some sources refer to monasteries as well as convents as places that are 12th house places because those are places that are isolated as well. The 12th house also rules scandals, fear, skeletons in the family closet. So it's a lot of drama up in there. So, I love a little tea. So 12th house is interesting to me. Shame and fear of being exposed are also in the 12th house. There's also a 12th house connection between suicidal thoughts and ideation. I've mentioned it on the channel a few times now, but the 12th house can be a house of hidden enemies. So traitors, spies, witches who are working against you, also weakness, chronic illness, and bondage. It also rules animals that are larger than a goat. So pretty much most animals that you can ride on as a human, that's going to be a 12th house animal. We can't forget hospitals, asylums, concentration camps. I would say plantations, like in places like the United States, Brazil, all the places where slavery, involved people actually working on those specific plantations. Or really any places that slaves are kept can be a 12th house thing. And, in the US, we can talk about that prison situation, which is essentially slavery in a sense. Likewise, the 12th house is associated with homelessness, the wounded, and the infirm. My mentor, Michael A. Bryan, often says that the 12th house is where the bodies are buried. He talks about it as a feeling of moving through the world without skin. So some of the other significations that I've seen recall the 12th house as a place of enlightenment, a place of personal insight, confinement, spiritual growth, repression, and the unconscious. So I think some of those things can be experienced as a result of really hard things that happen in the 12th house. Like typically if you go through hard stuff, you're going to experience enlightenment and spiritual growth, but it certainly doesn't feel that way starting out. So I have given you a whole heap of keywords about the 12th house. So now I'm going to share some 12th house experiences from my own life. It's like a pseudo story time. Okay. In one of my recent solar returns, I had the natal 12th house rising in my solar return chart. So the ascendant of my solar return chart showed up. If you put it on top of my birth chart, it would have shown up in the 12th house of my birth chart. So 12th house themes were being highlighted for me that year. Mind you, when I went through this year that I'm about to tell you about, I didn't really know how to do solar return charts yet. So it's not like I was sitting there thinking, oh, let me have the most 12th house year ever so that it could match up with my 12th house chart. No, these are just natural experiences that unfolded in that year. And looking back on them, I was able to see, wow, that really was a legit 12th house year. So I'll just share some things that happened during the course of that year. Okay, so I have a list here because it's a lot to remember. All right, so in my Muggle job, I am a consultant. And the clients that I worked with that year were very 12th housey clients. And it's not like I went and chose those clients. People sought me out for those specific opportunities. So one that I worked with that year was working with an organization that supports people who are incarcerated by presenting them with libraries. So putting libraries in prisons. Libraries are another 12th house thing because they're kind of a place of isolation. If you think about it, people just kind of hide away in the stacks. So this was kind of a doubling down of 12th house themes with prison libraries. I also worked with an organization that teaches kids to meditate. So meditation for me is a 12th house activity because you're going inward to isolate from everything else. So that was another example. And a third client that I worked with in my day job was an organization that helped kids with mental health issues. So anxiety, depression, and helping them to get treatment for that. So it was just like a whole slew of just 12th house activities in my day job. I also got sick a lot during my 12th house year. It felt like I could never get out of isolation and confinement. It was just one thing after the other. Anytime I tried to go outside, I was sat back down. I experienced a very painful loss that left me in despair in this year as well. My mental state was a hot mess. I felt like I needed to isolate myself because I felt like I couldn't trust anybody. The hidden enemies thing was very real. People who I had trusted my entire life let me down in very traitorous moves. And they show up in my 12th house in my birth chart. So they just kind of, that 12th house experience, when I wondered before, why is this person in my 12th house? It showed up and showed out in that particular year. Like, oh, now I see that this is the 12th house experience that we've been waiting for. It felt like in my 12th house year, I didn't really know who I was. It felt like my identity was being stripped away. So that feeling of being without skin was very felt by me. And to deal with some of the despair that I was experiencing, I found hypnosis for the first time, which is another 12th house theme. I did a past life regression session, which is really stripping away my identity from this lifetime so that I could experience something, from before to find meaning in it and to see what was being carried over. So that for me, going into that kind of unconscious space is very 12th housey. And that was such a profound experience for me that I decided that I wanted to learn hypnosis to help lead other people through that journey. So there was an identity shift there too. And now that's something that I'm able to help my own clients with. I also found 12-step programs in my 12th house year. Now, I won't say which programs I'm a part of because, one, you're not supposed to promote the specific programs. Two, it's none of y'all's business. But there are like hundreds of 12-step programs out there for whatever issue or addiction you're suffering with. There's probably something out there for you. Like 12 steps, 12 houses, seriously, it all aligns. But part of the whole goal of 12-step programs is to help you deal with self-sabotaging behaviors when you are acting as your own hidden enemy that is becoming not so hidden. There's the 12th house space for you to kind of isolate, be in this group that's a secretive group, this hidden group, to come together for healing. I mentioned libraries earlier with the prison libraries example, but I also spent more time at the library. I was at the library, several days a week, just finding that sense of peace and calm and isolation where I could just focus on work and just be. And this is something that I didn't think about until just now, but there were a lot of homeless people who would be at the library. So that was another 12th house theme that was ever present during that time. I found myself traveling far, far away because I wanted to isolate myself. I felt like I couldn't trust the people around me. So I was like, at least I'm going to go somewhere where I know I don't know these people and I know they don't have my back. So I'm not going to assume that someone's looking out for me when they're not, because I couldn't handle the betrayal anymore. So I was like, I got to get up out of here. Anytime I would try to go out and be amongst people, something would force me back inside to sit down. Okay, so there is one of my fellow astrologers who also went to the Oracular School of Astrology with me. His name is Jack Kowaleski. He says, when it's the 12th house year, you need to just lay on the floor. And that's like essentially what I needed to do. I needed to lay on the floor, but I didn't know that. So anytime I tried to leave the floor, I would get thrown back to the floor. So that's what the 12th house felt like. I also spent a lot of money I shouldn't have been spending because I was running away from laying on the floor. Overspending can be another 12th house activity. And for me, that was a part of my self-undoing. It's very much a dark night of the soul kind of thing where you're just having to let go of control and trust in spirit. Know that you can't see anything around you, so you can't trust the things that you're used to trusting in. Like, you are not the same person, so you can't even really trust yourself. So you just have to have this kind of very spiritual experience and have faith and know that a light is at the end of the tunnel. So that was what the solar return looked like. So in a word, rough. But had I known then what I know now about solar returns, I could have mitigated the situation a little bit more, right? I could have leaned into spirituality sooner, into hypnosis sooner, into meditation sooner. I'd be trying to put y'all on to these solar return readings. I needed a me back then. I didn't have me back then, not the same way that I have me now. I can get more specific than that, but just knowing that it was a 12th house year would have told me a lot and would have helped me to guide the situation differently. So anyway, I was meditating this week and really thinking about like what that 12th house year could be summed up as. And it was really just, I feel lost. I feel confused. God help me. That's what it was. And I don't say that just to frighten people, because again, I mentioned a few things that, may be able to help with that 12th house harshness of the experience. And a part of that is also just acceptance of the situation that's going on and understanding that this is a period of growth and development as a person. Knowing that I'm not in control of this and I have to let go of that idea of having control. That's that's a part of the 12th house thing. And that's what can make it so hard, is when you are having this, like, used to being like used to having a regimen, you're used to being in control, and then that's ripped away from you and you kind of are like floundering. So it can be very difficult to manage. A lot of people talk about the birthing process when it comes to the 12th house. So the whole process of being born into the world, typically babies spend time in their mother's womb, in the belly, just chilling, eating, maxing and relaxing, kicking the feet up every now and then just to say, hey, mom, I'm still here. That's what the baby experience is like. But then the birthday comes. And you'll notice that a lot of babies cry when they enter the world, because they're like, what the hell is this? Where am I? Who are these people? I don't know them. This doesn't feel the same. I'm uncomfortable. Babies are literally naked and afraid when they come into the world. And that's what the 12th house feels like. There's a sense of exposure and not knowing who to trust when you come in. And with the 12th house, like with babies, you just have to just cry out and trust that someone's going to hear your cries and respond to you. In the 12th house, you have to learn to put your pride aside and ask for help. And then a sense of discernment is going to have to come in, because you have to know, like, okay, is this help that's actual help? Is this coming from a good place? And sometimes it's hard to know, but you just have to trust that the right thing is going to come to you in the right time. As I mentioned, Saturn finds its joy in the 12th house. So Saturn loves to discriminate. Saturn loves to say yes and no. I can trust this person. I can't trust that person. So there's that discrimination coming into play. Now, when you have 12th house planets in the birth chart, there can be a sense that those planets are hidden away, that they're obscured. They may have trouble manifesting in the world. And also, whatever that planet represents may be something that you can't fully trust. So again, not every manifestation of the 12th house is negative. We'll go through some really nice examples. Not everyone who is in the 12th house is going to be in prison. Not everyone who's in a prison is a prisoner. So maybe you have strong 12th house stuff and you're working in a prison. I'm thinking of a client I had right now who had a lot of 12th house stuff in her chart. And she did experience some losses of close family members, but also she began working in a prison in the mental health, like psych ward of the prison. She also later worked in hospice care as a social worker, which is another 12th house thing, because there is an association with death in the 12th house, or long-term illness and infirmity. Maybe you're a hypnosis practitioner. Maybe you're someone who leads meditation. Maybe you're some type of doula that leads people to an experience of transformation. Maybe you work in a library. There are a lot of ways that it shows up. I'll share a couple of more examples of real life charts. I remember talking to this woman about her chart, and she was like, I have a really strong moon, but it doesn't feel like it. Like, why is my moon not doing what it's supposed to do? And I asked her more about her moon, what she meant. And her moon, I can't remember if it was in Taurus or Cancer, but it was one of the, it was either the exaltation or the ruler. And the moon for her ruled the 12th house, and it was in the 10th house. And so, or some combination like that. There was a 12th, 10th sort of situation going. And I was like, ma'am, your moon is doing exactly what it needs to do. She's someone who runs a group that supports tens of thousands of people in overcoming addiction. That is what she is known for. She literally has tens of thousands of followers who see her on social media, who know that she is a face of someone who has overcome addiction, and she nurtures people in that process. She's basically a mom to all of these folks who are struggling with 12th house issues. And I'm like, ma'am, your moon is doing exactly what it needs to do. So, she's just going to continue to grow in that experience of mothering and nurturing these people and changing so many lives around the world, literally. So Miles Davis is a 12th house person in his chart. So he has Taurus rising And Venus, which is the planet that rules Taurus, is in the 12th house in his chart. So that planet represents him. Venus is Miles in his chart. So Venus is in the 12th house. And he was known as the Prince of Darkness, which is kind of funny, right? While he was an incredibly famous jazz artist, obviously a talented musician, band leader, conductor, one of the things that stands out about him in his career was a lot of times he would perform with his back to the audience, and it really pissed people off. Like, they would be like, man, he's such a jerk. Like, how could he come up here and perform and turn his back on us? When really, he didn't want to shine himself. He wanted his art to shine, his music to shine. So that whole thing of obscuring himself and denying the public access to him is such a 12th house thing. He would often wear shades as well, like when he was doing interviews. That's also a 12th house sort of thing, just to kind of even hide your eyes, right? Your eyes, they say, are the windows to the soul. So if you're covering up your soul, then you're covering yourself up in the 12th house. At one point in Miles' career, he experienced a liver infection that took him away from touring for 3 solid months. He had lots of chronic health issues over the course of his life, including addiction to drugs. And I believe there was some depression there as well. There was a story where Clive Davis was leaving Columbia Records, and he apparently told someone who was taking his place to make sure they check up on Miles. And the person went to check up on Miles, and apparently he was living in like this roach infested place. He wouldn't come outside. He would only like peek through the curtains to see who was there. So that feels very 12th house and isolating as well, to me. And just one more 12th house story about Miles Davis. So many people know him for his voice, which is kind of a very much like a whisper kind of voice, which is almost silence, which is the 12th house thing, is that it can be a house of silence. But that voice came from an injury he experienced to his vocal cords after having surgery. He was told not to use his voice. He ended up yelling at someone in his band, and his voice was like that forever until he passed away. And he was embarrassed by his voice for a while. He wouldn't talk at all for a long time. So that is another 12th house thing, denying people access to your voice. He had lots of albums, but 2 that stand out for me with the 12th house situation is You Are Under Arrest. That's one album. He had another one called In a Silent Way. He's most known for his album Kind of Blue, which to me feels very 12th housey also. I'll end with a more positive 12th house example. You know, we went a little rough with Miles Davis. However, he did achieve fame, and he's known as one of the greatest jazz musicians to have ever lived. And you can't think of jazz without thinking about Miles Davis. So I want to say that too, that just because you have 12th house stuff, that doesn't mean that you can't be known for something or that you can't overcome the challenges that come with the 12th house. You definitely can. You can be a leader. It's going to depend on the rest of your chart, to be honest, but I don't want people to lose hope and think that they're destined to a life of imprisonment and sickness and addiction, because that is not the case. So Diana Rose Harper, she is a fellow Black woman astrologer. She's really dope. I'm going to link to some of her stuff below. She's done some lovely work and presentations and talking about the 12th house, specifically the luminaries in the 12th house. So the luminaries are the sun and the moon. And she herself, I think, has either both of her luminaries in the 12th house or at least just one. But when she talks about the 12th house and the luminaries in the 12th house, she's literally shedding light on the 12th house. So that's more of a positive manifestation. Like, hey, I have this 12th house stuff. I might as well talk about it. I might as well be about it because it's so integrated into who I am. I'll link to her specific talk on the 12th house luminaries below. If you're interested, you can go pick it up. Support Black women, okay? I know this video was a bit longer than what I normally post on the channel, but I really wanted to do the 12th house justice because it's such a powerful space and so many people get overwhelmed by it, and I wanted to shed a little bit of positivity on it and just try to give a more balanced approach to it. I hope you found some hope in this video, especially if you have a 12th house year coming up. I would love to talk to you about it. Feel free to hit me up for a reading. If you're going through a 12th house transit or solar return, just know that you're going to have to sit down before you're sat down. This is all about cutting away the trappings of your identity and finding the new version of you who's going to go forward in your life. If you'd like to hear another 12th house perspective, be sure to check out my girl Bianca on her YouTube channel. She's another fellow Black woman astrologer, and I'm really wanting to collaborate more with other women in this space. I'll post her channel in the description below. Bianca's so dope. Finally, if you like this content, please like it, share it, comment below. If you want to see more content like this, subscribe to the channel. If you'd like to book a reading with me to look at your chart, feel free to book a reading with me at homegirlastrology.com. Thank you for your attention. Thank you for watching, especially if you made it to this point. Peace, homies.